So the third of these parameters is the direction of light. Direction of light. And perhaps is the one that we should try to somatize better, because basically it is from this that the final result of our photograph will depend. Depending on the light that we see on the scene, that we have on the scene, and depending how we are going to use this light, we literally are going to draw our image, our photograph. So that at this point, how do consider this concept? Basically, here we are talking about that situation when we see directly the source of light. So that in this case, we used to say that we are talking about direct light conditions. In this case, we must keep in mind an assumption that really is quite simple, and probably all of us already have in its knowledge this assumption. We just need to rationalize it better, to make it a system for it. According to this assumption, depending on the light strikes the scene, it emphasizes some characteristics of the scene itself. So the frontal light, and basically with the frontal light I mean the light in front of the subject, so that the light placed just behind me who are photographing, this kind of light, this frontal light, emphasizes the colors, emphasizes the patterns. The lateral light, which comes with a lateral angle to the scene, emphasizes textures, emphasizes the roughness. And the backlight, the rear light, respect to the subject, emphasize the shapes. So that's summing up this system. Frontal light emphasize colors and patterns. Lateral lights emphasize textures and roughness. And rear light, backlight, emphasize shapes. Okay guys, let me do an experiment. With this little experiment I want to show you that the things works in the reality exactly what we said theoretically before. Now this is a fossil of ammonite, you see, and it's a stuff full of roughness, full of rough of details inside. Now I want to show you that changing the degree of the light with which I'm lighting it, it will change the result that we have in filming on photographing or photographing this stuff. Now this is a frontal light, you know. This is a frontal light because it is frontal in respect to the subject that we are filming, that we are shooting now. While I'm changing the degree with the light hit that subject, you can see that the details seems to grow up, and changing the horizontal direction of the light, I can literally design on this. I can literally paint with the light, okay? So that frontal light emphasize the patterns and the colors. In fact, these are really the true colors of the ammonite. Lateral light emphasize the texture, and of course posterior light, but this is a little bit difficult to see, posterior light emphasize the shapes. Considering this, and this is really important for our knowledge, considering this assumption and knowing this assumption, I can put myself and my camera in the right position respect to the light to achieve the goal I want. For example, if I'm photographing a painting, maybe it should be better to put the light behind me. So using a frontal light in this case, because the frontal light, we said, emphasize colors, emphasize patterns. In this case, if I use this kind of light, I'm going to emphasize colors and patterns. Now, if I'm photographing a texture, a roughness, it will be good to put a light with a certain angle respect to the subject, respect to the scene. The lower the better. The case that comes to my mind is when we photograph a rock painting, you know? If we photograph a rock painting, we use a frontal light so that a spotlight or flash on our camera, so a frontal light respect to the subject, we will certainly have true colors and a good pattern, but we will get a pretty flat image. But while we move the light laterally, depending on the angle that we give to the light, this rock painting, especially if we are talking about high release or down release, this rock painting seems to grow out from the rocks. Trust me. Why? This is because of the shadows. Because the lateral light forms the shadows in the rough in the texture, among the texture of the subject. It forms the shadows, and the shadows give dynamics and contrast to the scene. And the last case is when we use the light rear to the subject, when we put the light rear to the subject, behind the subject, so that in that case it's a clear moment when we want to emphasize the shade, because this is the classical backlight. Assimilating these three parameters of the color, temperature, dimension of the light and direction of the light well, and knowing how to control them, or at least knowing how they interact with the scene I'm photographing, at this point I can decide to put myself, I have all the parameters, to put myself in the correct position respect to the scene, respect to the light. I will know to choose what time of photography making that moment with that light, or I will wait for the light, for the right light, which allows me to achieve the results I want to achieve. This is important. I always have to make this relationship between the light I have in that moment on the scene and what I want in my mind to achieve. What kind of photograph I have in my mind to achieve. If the light is right, for that I have in my mind, I use that kind of light, of course. But if the light is not right in that moment, I will wait to get the right light on the scene, and the right light of the scene will arrive in a certain moment of the day. So, for example, if I get to a location just before dawn or after dusk, before the sunrise and after the sunset, in this moment I will be in indirect light conditions, because I don't see the light source directly on the scene. I don't have visible light source. So in this moment, all the scene will be uniformly illuminated, and I will have a flat image because I will not have dynamism and contrast on the scene. Why? Because I get no shadows on the scene, and we know that the shadows give to the scene dynamism and contrast. So in this case, maybe I should consider to photograph, to take that kind of photograph, like detailed photograph, or in any case, that kind of photograph which doesn't need dynamism of contrast, because I have not these elements on the scene in this moment. But immediately before that, after the sun come up from the horizon, and before the sun disappear on the horizon, in this moment I will have the light on the source, the light source on the scene. Sorry, I have a visible light source, very low, and it will be gorgeous for photographing textures, patterns, because we said before that this kind of light, with this kind of light, the roughness, the textures seem to grow up from the rocks, from the support. This is the so-called magic hour, and the light of this moment will be very, very beautiful. But since the light of the magic hours has gorgeous colors, the blue in the evening and the red, the gold in the morning, I can decide, I will be able to put myself in the correct position with the light behind me, with the sun behind me, if I see on the scene a pattern, colors, drawings that I would like to enhance, because this is a very amazing light to make this kind of work. For example, I will never go into the forest or into the woods with the full sunlight. If I'm not in indirect condition of light, it's better that I don't go in the forest, because I will never be able to take any kind of photograph in this kind of condition. It will be a disaster. It will be a blood wash, really. I always said to my students, if you have this kind of condition of full sun, let's keep away your camera and go to make a walk or to make a wash to the sea or something other else. Not photographing that time with a hard light, especially in a wood. And look, these concepts are universal, are really universal. I can apply them to every kind of photography and every kind of light. I mean, natural light or artificial light. The concepts are universal, and their value is for every kind of photograph. I can apply this concept to the macro too, to the macro photography too, to the landscape too, to the portrait photo too. Portrait is a little bit different, but these concepts are fundamentally universal. Well, at this point, I suppose I said everything about these three physical elements. It's enough for this video. It will be enough. But I want to spend another 2 words about the importance of this concept. Like we said, they are fundamental and they are universal concepts. The important thing is to well understand this concept, and to put them into a scheme, into a system, and to fix this system on our mind. And we will see that when we will be to photograph on field, these schemes will grow up automatically from our sense, and we will be able to act in the right condition respect to the light we could have in that particular moment. So that, trust me, you will never be wrong if you act with this scheme on your mind. Believe me. Okay, if you liked this video, put a like on it, please. And if you liked even more, so in this case you should consider to subscribe the channel, and important, to activate the notification bell to be always informed on new contents on the channel. Here we will talk about photography, we will talk about nature, we will talk about wildlife. And if you like and if you love these kind of contents, you are on the right place. I always say to you that you are on the right place. So, for now it's enough. I hope to see you soon. Hi, Guy.